Hi friends, welcome to biologyexamsforyou.com. Today the topic of our discussion is the difference between null and alternative hypothesis with a simple example. First of all, starting with the summary of scientific method. A scientific method starts with an observation. Then we will be asking questions why, how, what, like that. To define the problem, the next step is formulate a hypothesis. And this is the point which we are going to discuss in detail. And this is followed by conducting an experiment to find out whether the hypothesis is valid or wrong. And then we'll be drawing conclusions, that is accepting or rejecting the hypothesis, and finally publishing the result. First of all, starting with the definition of hypothesis. Hypothesis is an educated guess, a possible answer, or a predictive statement that can be tested scientifically. So it's based on previous experience on the topic, or by review of literature, or based on existing knowledge. In an experiment, there are two types of hypothesis: alternative hypothesis and null hypothesis. So let's explain the concept with a simple example. And this is an experiment. The researcher has defined the problem: effect of biofertilizer X on plant growth. Suppose the researcher has a new formulation and he wants to test the effect of that biofertilizer on plant growth. Alternative hypothesis is a hypothesis that the researcher tries to prove, and it is denoted by H1, and it is simply the opposite of null hypothesis. In this experiment, the researcher is actually applying biofertilizer X, and he is predicting that this biofertilizer X increases plant growth. So therefore the alternative hypothesis for this problem is application of biofertilizer X increases plant growth. Whereas null hypothesis, it is just the opposite of alternative hypothesis, and it is a hypothesis that the researcher tries to disprove or nullify. It is denoted by H0. The null hypothesis for this particular problem will be application of biofertilizer X do not increase plant growth. So alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis that the researcher tries to prove, whereas null hypothesis is a hypothesis that the researcher tries to disprove. Now moving to the second difference. Alternative hypothesis predicts that there is a statistical significance or relationship between the variables in the hypothesis under study. In this experiment there are two variables. First is the independent variable. It is a variable that the researcher changes. In this experiment it is the application of fertilizer X. Whereas a dependent variable is a variable that is affected by the change in the independent variable, or in other words, it is dependent on independent variable. So application of fertilizer X may affect plant growth, number of leaves, number of fruits, etc. Therefore, alternative hypothesis predicts that there is a relationship between these two. Change in independent variable significantly affects dependent variable, or the researcher predicts that application of fertilizer X increases plant growth, number of leaves, number of fruits, etc. Whereas null hypothesis predicts that there is no relationship between these two variables. Application of biofertilizer X do not increase plant growth. This independent variable, that is application of biofertilizer X, doesn't have any effect on dependent variable like plant growth, number of leaves, number of fruits, etc. Therefore, at the end of an experiment, we will either accept alternative hypothesis or accept null hypothesis. So accepting null hypothesis doesn't mean that that scientific experiment is a failure. That actually suggests the refinement of alternative hypothesis, modify the alternative hypothesis to get a better answer for the question asked, or to get a better solution for the problem. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. You are with biologyexamsforyou.com.